sitting right at the pulse of the travel industry, also dedicated to the cause of sustainability in the industry. This is Shoba Mohan, championing the cause with them, a subject very close to my heart. And it is our endeavor to ensure that in these times, as we pause with for the pandemic, we make it a point to drive home a few simple facts about sustainability that each one of us can follow, so that we travel, we promote travel, and we live sustainably. Today we have with us somebody who hugely well-traveled around the world, as he was an editor of the National Geographic. Please welcome Jonathan Tourtellot. Jonathan, so let's begin with this wonderful word called geotourism that you're credited to have coined.
Actually, my wife may get some of the credit too. A long time ago, I think it was around 1998, we were trying to figure out what kind of word might encapsulate everything that a place is about. And we were thinking, well, geographical character is one way to think of it, and that then shortened to geotourism. And that seemed like a pretty good idea. And it actually took about 3 more years before it finally occurred to me that maybe I should suggest to the National Geographic, where I was working, that they might want to take a look at this term. And the editor of National Geographic Traveler, which is where I worked for 20 years, there's National Geographic Traveler, thought it was a good idea. And before I knew it, I was suddenly the geotourism editor for Traveler. Okay. But the important thing about that term, which sometimes gets mixed up with geological tourism, which is something else entirely, is that it's an approach to tourism and it's holistic. And the definition that we put together was tourism that sustains or enhances geographical character of a place. And by that we mean its environment, its aesthetics, its geology for sure, its human heritage, its culture, and most important, probably the well-being of local people. A whole look at the place. Ecotourism is in there, yes. So is heritage tourism. So is cuisine, gastronomical tourism. It's all part of the whole picture. And the reason that the well-being of local people is important, create a virtuous circle, as they call it, where if local living, they'll see the value of what they've got, which after all, they're used to, and help protect that, preserve it, and maybe even come up with ways better.
Absolutely. And when you talk about geotourism, there is something that we've been, in India especially, we've been talking about is the intangible cultural heritage. Of course, heritage is a big part of it. The intangible cultural heritage, especially in a country like India or say Africa, where a lot of our traditional and cultural heritage has to be preserved in form of, folklore, in the form of folk art, textiles, crafts, even music, chanting, all these kind of, in fact, UNESCO has really charted out a separate section called Intangible Cultural Heritage, and they've been mapping this around India and the rest of the smaller cities, smaller countries in the subcontinent. So would you include intangible cultural heritage also as a part of geotourism?
Absolutely. Culture. That's living culture. That's what it's all about.
Living culture,
definitely. And in many parts of the world, there's a kind of balancing act here. In many parts of the world, tourism has helped save intangible culture that was otherwise disappearing under a wave of, Hollywood, or maybe in some cases Bollywood.
Bollywood, yeah.
But the ideal balance is an expression of intangible culture that both local people and visitors can enjoy. But the visitors often have enough money that they can help support and help keep alive traditions that might otherwise disappear.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, I mean, especially in India, a lot of crafts and a lot of traditional textiles have been, tourism has been credited to having brought it, into contemporary use. Yeah. And you've traveled the world, Jonathan. How many countries have you traveled to?
I haven't counted lately, not as many as people think, but 65 or 70, something like that.
Fantastic. You've been to India as well.
I've been to India, but only once, and basically only to Gujarat, so I'm overdue to come back to
You
India.
must be, yeah, it is time that you came back. Yeah. And I saw the thali, right? So would you be including, the cuisine of you would be when we talk about the geotourism or, the mapping of a destination's heritage or its culture, we will also include the cuisine, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yes. And what did you think when you went to Gujarat about the Gujarati cuisine?
I can't remember anything I didn't like, so it must have been pretty good.
Very good. Yeah.
Of course, as an American, some of the spicing can get a little high for me, but you get used to that after a while. One thing I was going to say about this, the enemy of geotourism is sameness. And so when you see the international chains and franchises come in, those may be valuable for local people. I wouldn't say anybody shouldn't be able to go to a McDonald's or a Wimpy's or whatever you may have in India. But the reason for travel, the value of travel, and the value that tourism can bring to travel is differences, distinctions, different things about different places.
The uniqueness of it.
Yeah, it would be a terribly boring world if everything were the same. So if I'm in Gujarat, I want to see and hear and eat things that are Gujarati-like. And if I'm in Rajasthan, I don't want them to be Gujarati. I want them to be Rajasthani.
Absolutely.
And so on.
Absolutely. So that's really brilliant, because one of the things I really struggle with, especially where international tourism is concerned, is that this, if you look at India, it's such a diverse country. I mean, every state is well known for something. But if you look at our promos, if you look at our banners, it's always one tiger, one temple, one dancer, anyway, and a heritage site or something like that. But there's so much more. So let's talk about the destination, Stewardship Center. How was it coined, and what has it set out to do?
Well, it's the continuation of a program that we ran within National Geographic for about 10 years. And then a lot of changes occurred at National Geographic. So this is the successor to it. But its main purpose is to promote wise tourism and enlightened destination stewardship. And what we're talking about is the action between tourism and care for places. In travel, we use the term destination, but everybody else calls it a place, and often my place, my home.
Yes.
But when a traveler arrives there, immediately that tourist becomes part of that destination, even if only for a few hours. And what that person does, where they go, what money they spend, how they behave, has an impact on the destination. And when, as in some cases with over-tourism, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people at the same time, that has been one of my main concerns before coronavirus came along. And it's one of my main concerns after it recedes, because all the forces of over-tourism are still there. But this is the chance for destinations to get a grip on and manage it.
Yeah. So, which coming to travel in the pandemic times, I don't want to say post-pandemic because we are still in the throes of it. People talk about, revenge tourism, this whole bounce back, and this whole aggression to tourism coming back is a bit scary, don't you think?
I find that a very strange term, revenge tourism. What does that mean? Who are you getting revenge on?
For the corona, the virus,
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, the imagery of the whole revenge tourism thing is this masses of people moving out and crowding areas and things like that. Yeah.
I think there will be a desperate need to get out of here.
Yeah.
But where they go and what they do is a key question, and now is our chance to help shape that. And to go back to your earlier destination of it's always a temple of tiger and so on, with all due respects, that's kind of uninventive marketing. And quite a few places that have been suffering from over-tourism are now trying to come up with ways for better distribution of the tourists. Now, that can be a challenge, because if it's your one and only trip to India, 9 out of 10 people are going to want to see the Taj. And for that matter, if it's your one and only trip, if you're Indian, to Agra, you're going to want to see the Taj. So this requires some delicate site management, and there's various ways to do this. But we have to face the fact that we are dealing with a world coming up on close to 8 billion people. And after we recover from the pandemic, I think affluence will return, travel will return, and everybody wants to see the Taj. In fact, I use in my talks the example of the Mona Lisa, because that's probably one of the smallest massive international attractions imaginable. It's about that wide.
Absolutely.
And when we did the math, we figured out that if 5 people were looking at that painting back in 1960, that would translate to well over 200 people trying to look at the same painting, which is the same size today as it was then, and seemed impossible. But if you see a picture of the crowds in the room with the Mona Lisa, it is over 200 people.
Absolutely.
And this is just by extension the problem that destinations because of limited area are facing. How many people can visit the Taj at one time without spoiling it for everybody else? It's a challenge. Absolutely. And in some cases, we just need to go somewhere else and be content in the Taj in pictures.
Yeah, and even this urge for revenge tourism, that also can be a choice, and you can make the right choice to pick on places where there is no crowds, and that's what Corona has taught us, right? To stay away from crowds. So I'm just hoping it's not revenge to one place. Yeah.
Maybe there'll be an instinctual desire to go to uncrowded places, but there always has been.
Yes.
A lot of people don't want to go to a place; they dismiss it as too touristy.
Yeah.
And we still have many great places in the world to visit that are not crowded.
Absolutely. And we, I run a company called Rare, and we market small owner-run hotels. Most of them are in rural areas, but each of them with some history, with water conservation project, something or the other. Maybe a rewilding project or an old fort that's been restored. So rural tourism is again another thing that has been talked about. Because I believe that rural tourism, in fact, it showcases India, in its the part of India, that image of India that you actually come to see. An urban city center like in Delhi or Mumbai, you can see those skyscrapers anywhere, right? But it is in these small little, off the beaten places, destinations that where tourism really, is the impact of tourism or the impact of the destination still figures. Now, talking about destinations, Jonathan, destination management, what are the key things that we should be looking at when we talk about destination? Now, when you mean destination management, would you mean the country as a whole, then break it down into smaller states, and within the states, the smaller regions?
There's no firm definition of what a destination is, and we have lots of angels on a pinhead arguments about that. But one way to think of it is it a place that you could reasonably explore in a week? And that's a very rough idea to consider. And also, does it hold together as a kind of single place in terms of the culture and the flavor of the place? So India itself is way too large to consider a single destination, other than I'm getting on a flight to India, and what's the next question going to be? Where in India? So the states themselves most of them are a bit too big, but at least we're getting to a manageable size. Goa is a manageable size, but it's one of the smallest states, of course. I think Kerala holds together as a destination. Gujarat does probably. Some of the larger ones, probably you need to think of it in more manageable bites. But to get to the question of management, the problem is tourism as a phenomenon has grown so in my memory, basically. I'm an old guy, but even so, it's pretty fast, that we don't have institutional structures around the world for dealing with it. And the challenge and that tourism as an industry is defined by where the money is. There's a transaction that's part of the tourism industry. But if you're staying in a hotel and you're paying for a room, okay, that's part of the tourism industry. The view outside the window, hey, that comes for free, part of it. And that, of course, is a big mistake, because the view at the window is probably the reason you're there. And so to bring these two together, the place and the businesses that are basically introducing tourists to the place, is one of the big challenges in management. And on top of that, the place is inhabited by people. And the tourists have an impact, both positive and negative, depending on how things are going. And so the structure that we're beginning to recommend, and by we, I mean not only the Destination Stewardship Center, but also the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which I'm a member of, and this new Future of Tourism Coalition, which we're both members of. The idea is to really promote the notion of collaborative management for a destination. And local people need to be at the table, or at least their representatives need to be at the table. Local businesses, particularly businesses that are sensitive to this sort of thing, and I think Rare India is an excellent example of that, they need to be at the table. And if there are civil society organizations, NGOs, like groups that are preserving history, groups that are preserving nature, and so on, that's part of the tourism attraction. They need to be at the table. And government needs to be at the table. And what we recommend is that it should be about a one-third split around that table. One-third government, one-third private sector, one-third civil society. The NGOs, universities belong in that group. And part of the reason for that, we discovered, is that if the government changes and the government's been running it, the new government will throw everything out and start all over. No, we need continuity. And so this way, the new government can come in, they've got their one-third, but the other two are still there.
Still working on their one-third.
Yeah,
I think that's...
So that gives some continuity, but because government is ultimately the entity in charge of the place, they have to be at the table. And often different parts of government aren't coordinating very well. The environmental department and the economic development department may be at loggerheads over something. Absolutely. And tourism has a role in there, in both those departments. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to go on to make this work well. But to date, almost no places have been set up that way. Very few. And the ones that are now beginning to think that way tend to be the ones that were really suffering from over-tourism. Barcelona is beginning to think that way. They've got a council which looks a lot like a destination stewardship council. So that's the approach I would encourage. For India, of course, this needs to be shaped to how India works and how the individual states work, and may be different from one to the next. But the important thing to begin thinking of is that the ultimate product of tourism is the place. It's not just the industry, it's not just the transactions.
Yeah, it is the place, and then the people of the place, the residents of the place.
And the place includes the people.
People, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, there has been, suddenly there is this word called regenerative travel. And it's, one of the lovely articles that I read said, sustainability has to be set aside. Now it's regenerative travel. What do you think, Jonathan?
I don't mind it. I think it's okay. I need to look up some more definitions of it, but I was happy to sign on to it. I've had a bit of a problem with sustainability only because it's so often interpreted as meaning the environment only. And the environment's incredibly important without question. But the regenerative idea seems to be a little broader than that, and for that reason, it's geotouristic.
Yeah, true. And one country which I know you said Barcelona is doing it around that way, but I think Slovenia.
I was just going to say Slovenia seems to be trying.
Seems to be, and New Zealand is coming up with something fantastic.
Does a good job, and some
Costa
of the
Rica.
Nordic countries.
Costa Rica is. Costa
Rica made a name for itself in ecotourism, and given the nature of Costa Rica, that was probably exactly what they should do.
Yeah,
it's not particularly culturally diverse like India, but it sure is biologically diverse.
Yes.
So that was a good decision.
It's a great example.
And Scotland is trying to go in that direction. We'll see how that happens.
Sorry, I missed that. Which country is that?
Scotland. In the UK.
In the UK, yes, Scotland. Yes. Yeah, I saw that. I saw a presentation on that one. Yeah, and
of course Bhutan in a way.
Bhutan, yes,
Bhutan gets a lot of good press, but I was surprised to learn that even Bhutan has had problems with over-tourism in particular areas because they have this very careful filter for incoming international tourists, except for people from the subcontinent.
And
therefore, some of the temples popular with Indians were getting overcrowded.
I know, it's a free border. It's an easy border to cross over.
So they're going to have to figure out what to do about that.
And they've been talking about it for some time. In fact, when you go to Bhutan, and if they see, muck somewhere, they'll say Indians. I said, really? I mean, they'll just say Indians. Yeah, but there is, because West Bengal, I mean, it's just across the border. People just come in. Yeah,
there are a lot of Indians, and they want to see those temples. So
absolutely, yeah, that's true. Like I told you about while we were talking about this, what happens in some of the distribution is, how do you distribute your tourism capacity adequately is one. And then what about in India, we're facing a very, very strange kind of issue, because domestic tourism is our answer to everything, and it's really big. We are relooking at our strategies to involve the domestic tourism. So when you're kind of putting out the laying out the guidelines for destination management, how do you balance the inbound and domestic? I mean,
I think if it weren't for the virus, domestic tourism gets shrugged off as the poor boy. We don't care about them. They don't spend enough money. And now we've seen that when an international crisis arises, domestic tourism is what you need to survive touristically. So I think in general, domestic tourism needs more respect, even if they don't spend as much money. And there's another reason too, and this is a core issue of what I referred to earlier. Often the people of a state or a country don't pay enough attention to their own special places because it's more exotic and exciting to go somewhere else. And now they're almost forced to learn about their own places.
Absolutely.
We just ran an article on what happened in Serbia over the course of this summer. And a lot of Serbians discovered the backcountry of Serbia for the first time because previously they had all gone to the Mediterranean coast and sat in resorts. And what happened was very interesting. The local people made a lot more money than they were used to because these coast-going Serbians were used to spending a lot more money. So that was the good news. But they were also being treated as if they were the staff of a resort, which they weren't. They were the people that lived there. And I've heard somewhat the same thing happen in the U.S. state of New Hampshire and probably other places too. So there's an interesting discovery process going on. But by and large, it was good for local people in the middle of a pandemic to get tourists coming back when they didn't think they'd have any. It was very bad in March and April, and then when they loosened it, domestic tourists came in, but the borders were still closed. So I think it's great for people to discover their own country and to have respect for what their own country has to offer and take better care of it. This is a big problem around the world. You get used to what you see every day and figure, who cares about that? But it's not on the world stage. What you have is unique. It is special. It's important to humanity. It's that intangible heritage that we're talking about is a tangible heritage. And most places have something unique. And that's to be prized.
Absolutely. One thing I would like to, before we end this conversation, is pricing. In destination management, I think pricing is the key, and because what I've seen happen is that when you're promoting, like for instance, homestay and community-owned, homestays or places to stay. If there are too many of them, and there are great examples of this, there's the possibility to improve your pricing doesn't exist. So you are actually, in your effort to, get that, 20 or 50 travelers who are coming there, everybody is trying to, put down their prices, and, because you've created competition among yourselves. So in destination management, how would you look at a problem like this?
Well, this is where the private sector has to do some sorting out amongst itself and with the government. And I have a opinion that will probably offend everybody, which is that you need to have both high end and middle and low end in reasonable numbers. And one thing that, let's talk about Airbnb, which has been very controversial around the world. When the original idea of Airbnb started, I thought it was a great idea. I still think it's a great idea. Stay in a local place with the owner and have a taste of local life and be able to learn from the owner, and vice versa. That's a great idea. Where it went sour is when the owner, in fact, lives in a different city and has bought up 5 or 10 or 20 local residences just to make them rentals to tourists. That's not the right idea.
Yeah, that's
and
that
changes the whole real estate landscape to that city or place, and is not correct. So I think in this case, it now falls to government to put regulations in place that get the Airbnb situation back to the original idea. at that point, it's not going to be a competition for luxury hotels. They're at different ends of the price point scale. Same for business hotels. It will be a challenge for mom and pop small inns and whatnot, but they have different types of services, and I think at this point it's fair competition to, if you're running a small inn, you've got to offer something different from an Airbnb with a room in a house or behind the house.
Absolutely. And also I think Airbnb, to go and stay in somebody's house is very demographic based. I mean, for instance, I wouldn't like to go and stay in someone's house, and generally it's too personal for me. So yeah, I think like you said, I mean, everybody's got a little everybody's got a niche there. One thing that usually bothers people is, like you said, people will not like what you said, and you're very right about it, that we need the high end, we need the middle end, we also need the low end. But the thing that in India at least is that people in the lower end, the lower end travelers, people who travel in the middle and lower end travelers, they kind of don't really treat the destination right. So that's one big challenge here, and I don't think so. I think there is always this scope for. I mean, India, for instance, the Indian traveler is still an evolving traveler.
Yeah.
Right. He does all the right things when he goes abroad. So I think it's just how you manage. But that's the challenge. That the middle and the low end.
It is a challenge, and I'm glad to see that some of the DMOs around the world, the destination marketing and management organizations, are now beginning to make how to travel well part of their package. It's not just come and see such and such place, but here's how to behave when you get there. And that's a start, but it's only a start. It reminds me of a conference we were having, which went on for 3 days a long time ago, and it was in South Africa. Training badge of certification for a traveler. And if you have gone through the How to Be a Good Traveler course, then you go to the head of the line, or you get a discount or something like that, and begin creating an incentive to be a good traveler. Nobody's done that yet that I know.
That's a brilliant idea. Nobody's done that yet. That's a brilliant idea. We've been doing most of these associations and societies for responsible tourism, and they do have little Zoom sessions and little classes they've been doing for travelers, for lodge owners and things like that. But and there are guidelines, Responsible Tourism Society of India has put out for how to be a green traveler. Magazines have written about it. I saw 5 top things or 6 top things that you have to do by National Geographic as well. But a certification course is the first time I'm hearing it, and I think that's really brilliant. That's really good.
You can get a card. I'm a certified.
Absolutely, you kind of get. I know. I think that's brilliant. That's a brilliant idea, Jonathan. That's a brilliant idea. Coming back to marketing of places, So, how do we? What would you recommend for destinations to market themselves? I mean, people don't put out their sustainable best practices or their their garbage, their safe garbage disposal, or they don't talk about this enough in their in their promotions or in their marketing material. What would you recommend?
Well, this has been a long ongoing argument among marketers, and I think the good news is it's drifting in the direction that promoting your sustainable practices is getting better and better as a selling point. It has been in the past, and it probably still is, weak with some markets because people are afraid they've got to give something up. Oh, you're a green hotel. That means I'm going to be uncomfortable, or I'm going to be sleeping on a straw bed.
I know, basic rustic.
Yeah.
I know that, basic rustic. Yeah, I've heard that, yeah.
But I think a way to get into this is, in effect, a geotourism approach, which is to say, if you come to our hotel or our destination, we take good care of the environment. But it's tucked in among all these other things, including that part of the environment you want to see, which is local wildlife or a local habitat or something special in that regard. We're taking good care of this for you, the visitor, because we're taking good care of it for us who live here.
Yes.
And I think with that kind of holistic approach, which also is stressing the importance of the place, that's a way to kind of get the environmental message in there. And those that respond to it will like it. And those that are resistant are going to be distracted by all the other things.
All the other things, yeah. And, especially with animals, wild animals being used in tourism. There's been quite a bit, especially about elephants in India. I support an organization called Wildlife SOS. They, in fact, have been credited with removing the dancing bears, and now they're working on elephants. So this elephant ride thing has been big. And what do you think about that? And one of the things with respect to marketing is that, if you kind of put it out that we don't do this, they feel you're making it a commodity.
And I think that's a valid point as well, but so many places don't take out their trash. It's still a point maybe not to make not only that we take out our trash, but we are a leader in getting everybody to take out their trash. And all over the world, that's a good thing to be saying. And by take out the trash, I mean everything that involves pollution and environment. To avoid climate change, that means more creative ways to avoid carbon footprints and so on. And this is where the private sector can often shine, because that's where the invention gets made. We come up a new way to recycle this, or to avoid using gasoline here and instead something else.
And I do think it has to be called out.
To me, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think it's valid to be called out, right?
Yeah, particularly in the context of what's going on in the world today.
Absolutely. We are running out of time, but I have two quick questions to ask you. In your, in this, in all your travels, in all your work with sustainability, have you seen any strong coding for, the elements that will that are a part of sustainability? Because there is still this, what all includes sustainability, to make it easy for people. Have you seen a coding? Like, luxury has a code, right? Have you seen? Yeah.
Too complicated, I think, for the consumer is the Global Sustainable Tourism criteria. And that's two sets of criteria, one for businesses and one for destinations.
Yes.
I've been heavily involved with the one for destinations.
Yes.
And that's a good starting point. Even if you're a small destination and don't want to get certified, it's still a good set of principles to steer by. Another one are the 13 principles that the Future of Tourism Coalition has come up with. And that in turn was informed by the 13 geotourism principles that we came up with back at National Geographic. And
yes, I think I saw that article. Yeah.
Some code for businesses. And I'm sure there are others out there. We can't be the only three who have thought of this.
Yes.
But I would say the GSTC criteria are the closest thing we've got to an internationally agreed upon minimum. And I stress that point. And even though they're challenging, that's the minimum. And beyond that, what else can we do to make the place better, make tourism better, make it more rewarding for residents, more rewarding for tourists? And that's, where really the exciting part of all this is. Principles look at that as well as at the minimum necessary for sustainability. We want sustainability plus.
Plus, yeah. And talking about sustainability plus, in this pandemic days, most with all this germophobia going about, and I see a lot of single-use things thrown about. The beaches are now littered with masks and things like that, and many people, including some of the leaders in tourism, have said, sustainability has to be set aside till business revives, and I don't agree with that. What do you have to say? Because that's very important for people to hear.
Thinking in terms of sustainability as being something separate from economic survival is, I think, again, a mistaken perception of what tourism is all about. What tourism is all about is taking care of the place, taking care of the people. And yes, the economy is incredibly important. And if you want to worry about taking care of the economy, take care of all these small businesses that are being killed off by the pandemic. All the local businesses that add flavor and interest to a place, and so many of them are dying, and what's going to survive? The international chains. This is disastrous loss, I think. And that is part of what it takes to fight the pandemic. As far as all the plastic it's causing, that's a real problem, and all I can say is don't throw it in the ocean, don't throw it on the beach. Let's try to figure out creative ways to get rid of it safely, and let's try to make sure that we reduce the chances of increased pandemics in the future. We know how they're tending to come, and that involves management of things like wet markets and rainforest destruction and so on. That's where these diseases come from. So them at the root is important too, or we're going to have another one in about 10 or 15 years. Expect it, plan for it.
Absolutely.
But sustainability is survival.
That's on that note. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I mean, I could talk to you through the night. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But thank you really for your insights. I think it was truly valuable. That was amazing listening to Jonathan. All of you listening in, thank you so much for listening to us on this episode. Kindly leave your thoughts and your messages, comments. Share this video widely. Share articles by The Dope on sustainability on all your social media pages. It will take all of us promoting these ideas around sustainability all the time to all the people we know for the change to happen in the travel industry and also in the world.